Hey guys, tonight we drift, yes, literally drift, into the vibrant heart of the Aztec world, where farms float, flowers bloom from nowhere, and the water itself seems to hum with ancient secrets. Imagine stepping onto a soft patch of land, only to realize it's not land at all. It's a garden island, bobbing gently under your feet, tethered to a watery maze of canals and dreams. The air smells like wet earth and marigolds. The sun glints off the lake like it's in on the secret. And everything you thought you knew about farming gets flipped on its head. Of course, you probably won't survive this little trip. Let's be real. You're barefoot in the middle of an Aztec empire, surrounded by warriors in jaguar skins, and you've got the cardio endurance of someone who considers scrolling a thumb workout. But don't panic. You're here to explore, not to fight. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and what time it is where you're listening. Are you floating in Tokyo at 2 a.m.? Or snuggled in Nebraska just past midnight? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're in Tenochtitlan, the shimmering jewel of the Aztec world, a city balanced on Lake Texcoco like some kind of divine illusion. Except it's very real and very loud. There's shouting, flutes piping from rooftop altars, vendors haggling over cocoa beans, and beneath it all, the gentle splash of canoes drifting through canals. You step aboard one, the woven reeds creaking softly under your weight, and a young boy paddles you out toward the edge of the city. This is where the magic happens. The Aztecs, ever the overachievers, looked at a swampy, shallow lake and said, "Perfect. Let's build a farming empire here." And so they invented chinampas, artificial floating islands made from woven reed mats layered with mud, lake sediment, and rotting vegetation. You'd think that would collapse in a week, but surprise, it created one of the most efficient agricultural systems in human history. You glide past rows of them, each one a miracle of symmetry and survival. Trees like willows and ahuejotes line the edges, their roots plunging deep into the water to anchor these floating farms in place. Corn, beans, squash, chilies, and amaranth sway in the breeze. Flowers, too, because why not feed the gods while you're at it? The boy pulls the canoe alongside one of the chinampas, and you hop onto it, carefully. It's sturdy, but it still floats, like standing on a well-behaved trampoline. The soil is damp, black, and absurdly fertile. You kneel down and scoop a handful. It smells like earth after rain and teems with life. This soil is the product of hundreds of years of dredging nutrient-rich muck from the lake bottom. They called it tlaliatl, and it was basically the Aztec version of Miracle Grow. It didn't start with the Aztecs, though. The idea of chinampas goes way back. Some historians trace it to earlier Mesoamerican cultures like the Xochimilca, who settled in the southern lakes centuries before. But the Aztecs, they scaled it up, turned it into a full-blown ecological machine. By the time the Spanish showed up, there were more than 20,000 acres of chinampas, stretching like green rafts across the lakes. You pluck a tomato from a nearby plant. It's small, golden orange, and warm from the sun. When you bite in, the skin bursts with a tangy sweetness. And here's your first fun fact of the night. The word tomatl comes straight from Nahuatl, the Aztec language. So every time you order a tomato sandwich, you're whispering a tiny homage to a floating garden. But don't get too comfy. Building these things wasn't exactly a summer hobby. Imagine hauling logs and muck day after day, layering reeds, mud, more reeds, more mud, until you've built a platform thick enough to support not just crops, but tiny houses, shrines, and livestock. It was exhausting, sacred work. Oh, and here's a tidbit that'll stick with you. Aztec gardeners sometimes used crocodile dung as sunscreen while toiling under the sun. It's one of those facts historians bring up, then quietly back away from. Whether it worked or just made you smell like an angry lizard. Well, historians still argue whether this was genuine skincare or ritual weirdness. As the sun sinks behind the volcanic peaks in the distance, Popocatépetl and Iztaccíhuatl, eternal lovers turned to stone, you watch as workers tend to the crops with a rhythmic grace. They sing softly, their voices rising with the scent of copal incense from a shrine. You start to feel it, that deep, ancient calm, like you're watching the world breathe. But there's more to these chinampas than just food. They're status symbols, battlegrounds, and spiritual offerings. Owning a good plot meant you were somebody. The elite even had decorative chinampas covered in flowers for their own pleasure. Floating botanical gardens in the middle of the lake. Imagine pulling up to a date's chinampa and seeing rows of purple dahlias and crimson coxcombs. That's a flex. And yes, everything was connected. These farms didn't just float around like lonely rafts. They were arranged in a perfect grid, crisscrossed by canals that worked like streets. The city and countryside blurred together. You'd hop in a canoe to visit your cousin, who'd harvest some fresh herbs off the side of his chinampa, before offering you a tamale wrapped in maize leaves grown 5 feet away. But let's not romanticize it too much. This wasn't some Eden. It was strategic, political, and constantly maintained. If you neglected your chinampa, it didn't just decay, it sank. Gone. And then you'd be known as the guy who let his farm drown. Not ideal in a society obsessed with balance, cycles, and order. As night falls, torches light up along the canal edges, casting golden halos on the water. You hear drums in the distance, and the haunting call of a flute. The stars above begin to flicker, points of light mirrored in the black waters below. You lie back on the chinampa, the damp earth pressing cool against your shoulders, and wonder at the minds that built this world, equal parts engineer, artist, and priest. They didn't just survive on this lake, they flourished. They danced on the water. And now, gently, the canoe begins to drift again, pulled softly through the darkness, deeper into the heart of these floating fields. You're still drifting, low, slow, and steady, along a canal so narrow the willow branches whisper against your shoulders. The moon hangs heavy above, casting silvery light on the water, and the chinampas stretch endlessly in every direction, like a checkerboard built for gods. You pass a family loading corn into a canoe, the golden kernels catching the light like treasure. A dog barks in the distance, then settles. Somewhere, someone is singing again. You're in the lungs of the Aztec Empire now. Not the temples or pyramids, but the floating farms that fed millions and made this watery world possible. By day, these chinampas are a blur of movement and sound. Wake up before the sun, grab your obsidian-bladed digging stick, and it's go time. Aztec farmers, or chinampanecas, had the kind of routine that would make your average wellness influencer cry. They planted in organized polycultures, corn, beans, and squash, the holy trinity of Mesoamerican agriculture, each crop helping the others thrive. Beans climbed corn stalks, squash shaded the soil. It's genius. And here you are, just now learning to keep a basil plant alive on your windowsill. You crouch beside a farmer as he presses seeds into the moist soil with calloused fingers. There's no yelling, no chemical fertilizers, no spreadsheets. Just centuries of inherited rhythm and the soft hum of bees. They even rotated crops and used compost, which included everything from lake muck to crushed bones. Oh, and human waste. Yeah, you are standing on literal poop-powered productivity. Welcome to sustainable living 15th century style. Here's the twist that makes your eyelid twitch. These chinampas, they weren't actually floating. Not really. They were anchored to the lakebed with trees and poles, with years of silt and soil compacted until the whole thing became more stable than your group chat. It's just that from a distance, or if you didn't know the engineering, it looked like the land was gliding over the water. That illusion? Pure design. Now imagine scaling this up. Canoes constantly glided between the chinampas, transporting fresh produce to market, sometimes traveling 5 miles in one direction. And these weren't your grandma's paddle boats. The Aztecs had entire logistics systems based on canoes, with traffic flow, loading zones, and market deliveries that would make an Amazon warehouse weep with envy. You pass by a canoe filled with bright red chili peppers and a wide-eyed kid holding onto a massive gourd like it's a life preserver. This isn't some rare day. This is Tuesday. Of course, not everything grown here went into bellies. A lot of it was ritual. Certain flowers were only for offerings. Other plants were for dye, medicine, or, in some cases, poison. You remember how cocoa was used as currency? Well, certain chili-based dyes could be used as tribute too. The chinampa was not just a farm, it was a vault. And now for something spooky. Some chinampas were so large and labyrinthine that people believed spirits wandered through them at night. There are old Nahuatl poems that speak of shadows moving where no farmer should be, whispers rising from the lake, and fields that sprouted more than just crops. Historians still argue whether these tales were metaphors, cautionary stories, or maybe just very creative ways to keep nosy kids from wandering into the fields unsupervised. Still, you glance behind you. The moonlight glints on the water as you enter a wider canal where a floating market is in full swing. Yes, a market on water. Canoes lashed together, brimming with baskets, pottery, roasted insects, and flower garlands. Someone offers you a tamale. Another hands you a xochitl flower for luck. You spot a noblewoman gliding by under a canopy, flanked by 2 attendants with feather fans. And here you are, covered in chinampa dirt, trying not to trip over a squash vine. It's humbling. What's wild is how much of this design was geared toward self-sufficiency. One family could manage several chinampas and live entirely off their yield, eating, trading, healing. And with the canals acting like roads, you didn't need horses or carts. It was like a floating suburb, if your suburb had obsidian tools and bi-weekly sacrifices. Speaking of which, food wasn't the only thing cultivated here. These spaces were used for growing sacred flowers for ceremonies, herbs for priest healers, even spots for contemplative isolation. Some high priests and scholars used remote chinampas as retreat sites. Yes, ancient Aztec academics went on floating sabbaticals. Just imagine you're a philosopher on your garden island, sipping cacao and thinking deep thoughts about hummingbirds and war gods. Of course, there were risks: floods, droughts, invasions. During tense times, chinampas could be raided or burned. That's the downside of building paradise. It's fragile, but the Aztecs kept rebuilding, reinforcing, expanding. They even created artificial dikes to control the water levels, separating salty and fresh water and ensuring the lakes didn't destroy their work. It was agriculture by divine geometry, and they kept pushing the system. When population grew, they added more chinampas, packed them closer. It was all about density and access. Feed more people, with less land, faster. You hear historians debate if this was the peak of sustainable farming, or if they were on the edge of collapse when the Spanish arrived. Either way, it was dazzling. Here's something that might keep you up a little longer. Some researchers believe the chinampas had a pulse. Not metaphorically, literally. That the natural layers of rotting material and water beneath them created a micro-ecosystem that moved, breathed, even generated heat. In winter, crops stayed warmer. In summer, the layers kept cool. Some even suggest this living soil had acoustic properties, like the chinampas whispered if you knew how to listen. Wild, right? Now, you're drifting again, this time past chinampas that have been abandoned. Vines creep over the edges. Trees stand half drowned in mist. The silence is heavy. And somewhere nearby, a frog croaks. Low, guttural, ancient. You can still find chinampas today, mainly in Xochimilco, south of Mexico City. They're a UNESCO heritage site now, more for tourists and flower boats than feeding empires. But the bones of the old system are still there, like echoes beneath the surface. Locals tend to them, fiercely proud. There's even a slow movement to revive the chinampa as a model for urban farming. Floating farms in modern cities? Don't laugh. You might be composting in a kayak next year. So next time you eat corn or tomatoes or chilies, think of the lake. Of the boy paddling through mist at dawn. Of the woman digging compost with sacred rhythm. Of the soil, layered and alive, floating but firm. Of an empire not built on steel or stone, but mud, roots, and flowers. You breathe in deep. The air is cooler now. The lights from the city flicker behind you. You've been among the gardens of the gods, the floating farms of survival and spectacle. The canoe stops. You step off, barefoot again, into soft earth that's half dream, half miracle. Now, breathe a little slower. Let your thoughts drift like those early canoes, rocking gently in the dark, surrounded by the hum of night birds and the soft lapping of lake water. You're safe now. No more jaguar warriors or ghost gardens, just the memory of green islands stitched into the fabric of a vanished world. Picture yourself lying back in a field of marigolds, their petals rustling like whispers. Above you, stars shimmer in silence, and below you, the earth is thick and warm and full of life. The chinampas stretch out around you like the pages of a forgotten book. Still open, still waiting. The sounds fade, the markets bustle, the rhythmic digging, the paddle slipping through water. All gone now, tucked away behind the curtain of sleep. Let your breath slow. Let your body sink, like roots into soft, rich soil. You've walked through floating gardens tonight, and now it's time to float, too.